Ethics is concerned with both what kind of person I am, with character, and with the choices and decisions I make. Of course, to a great extent, the decisions I make help shape my character, and the kind of person I am influences the decisions I make. Whenever I make a choice or decision, I might have a feeling of satisfaction and pride because I did what I believe in the depths of my conscience to be true, right, and good. Of course, sometimes I ignore my conscience, and I make choices that leave me feeling guilty and ashamed of myself. The Merriam-Webster Dictionary defines conscience as, quote, the sense or consciousness of the moral goodness or blameworthiness of one's own conduct, intentions, or character, together with a feeling of obligation to do right or to be good, unquote. Many people think of conscience as an inner voice that urges us to do what we believe is right. The Catechism of the Catholic Church, citing the Fathers of the Second Vatican Council, says, quote, deep within his conscience, a person discovers a law which he or she has not laid upon her or himself, but which must be obeyed. Its voice, ever calling him or her to love and to do what is good and to avoid evil, sounds in her or his heart at the right moment, for every person has in her or his heart a law inscribed by God. Conscience is a person's most secret core and sanctuary. There each person is alone with God, whose voice echoes in his or her depths. Conscience is a judgment of reason, whereby the human person recognizes the moral quality of a concrete act that he or she is going to perform, is in the process of performing, or has already completed. Remember Jiminy Cricket's advice? Always let your conscience be your guide. Another way to describe conscience is condensed character. See this can of Campbell's soup? It's condensed. All of the extras, like water, have been extracted, and the soup has been reduced to its essentials. My conscience is the essential me, my core, what I truly am when push comes to shove. Character and decision-making, then, are all central concerns of ethics, and the role of conscience is primary. So Catholic moral teaching urges that every person, A, does whatever is possible to have a fully formed and mature conscience, B, that she or he do what is necessary to inform that conscience about any and all options before making any decision, and C, that in the end he or she must obey that conscience. Well then, how does a mature, well-formed conscience happen? Why is it that some adults, and even some youngsters, seem to have fine-tuned consciences, while others seem to be able to say and do practically anything without shame? For example, most of us have a conscience that values the virtue of honesty. When we behave honestly, that conscience rewards us by making us feel good about ourselves. And if and when we act dishonestly, we feel guilty and at least a little bit ashamed. What can we do to help ourselves and others form consciences that will, in fact, value positive virtues such as honesty? What can we do to help ourselves and others become people of virtue? In poll after poll, year after year, when parents and other adults are asked that question, they usually come up with 3 tactics they believe might help the children in their lives form their consciences properly. First, use examples. Be a good example and role model yourself, and draw the child's attention often to the honesty of siblings, of famous people from history, of the saints, and so forth. Second, lecture the child about honesty. Parents should explain why honesty is important, and that should be reinforced by sermons in church, by teachers in school, and coaches on the field, and all other adults. And the third tactic, reward honest behavior in some way, and punish dishonest behavior. Well, without going into depth, let it be said that researchers have tested these methods and found their effectiveness inconclusive. For example, the team of Hartshorne and May interviewed hundreds of subjects and were able to identify 2 sample groups. One group had been subjected to a high degree of example, reward, punish, lecture. For example, students in military schools. The second group had relatively little of that by comparison. Most of us would fall in the middle somewhere and would not have qualified for this study. Obviously, we would expect the first group to value honesty more than the second. to feel guiltier when they lied, and to feel more proud when they were honest. We might even expect them to act honestly more consistently. The surprise is that, in fact, both groups, number one, valued honesty equally, and number two, exhibited habitual honest behavior. In other words, the example, reward, punish, lecture method may be helpful, but it doesn't seem to be decisive in any way. That brings us to the obvious question. If people don't form their consciences by means of example, reward, punishment, lecture method, then how does it happen? Enter the late Lawrence Kohlberg of Harvard University. Kohlberg was interested in this very issue and decided to interview individuals over long spans of time to try to understand the formation and growth of their consciences. His subjects were interviewed over many years, and with the help of cohorts of graduate students, Kohlberg was able to recognize patterns of growth. Here's a simple example. In his first interview, a young boy of 5 might be told this simple story. Johnny was playing outside and came running through the kitchen door. When he threw open the door, he accidentally knocked over a tray he didn't know was there, and 10 teacups fell on the floor, and all 10 broke. Later that week, Johnny's sister Mary was climbing up on the kitchen counter where her mother told her never to go. She opened the cabinet door, and 2 teacups went crashing on the floor and shattered. The interviewer would then ask the 5-year-old, "Who did the worst thing?" Almost all young children will reply that Johnny did the worst thing. Why? Because he broke more cups. But a few years later, those same kids, when given a similar scenario, will reply that Mary did the worst thing. Why? Well, Johnny may have broken more cups, but Mary was being disobedient, they recognize. In other words, at an early stage of development, children's consciences assume good and bad is measured only by the physical consequences of an act. Breaking 10 cups is worse than breaking 2. But at a later, more mature stage, their consciences take into consideration other factors, such as whether the consequence was accidental or deliberate. Kohlberg saw this pattern of growth and development over and over again in the volunteers he and his team interviewed, and eventually he arrived at a theory that describes 3 levels of moral reasoning, 3 kinds of consciences. He calls them pre-conventional moral reasoning, the childish conscience, conventional moral reasoning, the typical adult conscience, and post-conventional moral reasoning, the fully formed mature conscience. Each of these 3 levels is further divided into 2 stages. 3 levels, 6 stages.